The crisp autumn wind carried the scent of pumpkin spice and freshly baked goods as I made my way down Main Street, clutching a stack of flyers for the annual Harvest Festival. The town square bustled with activity, and I couldn't help but smile at the familiar faces, setting up booths and decorating the park's gazebo with vibrant fall foliage. "Lila, over here!" My heart sank as I turned to find my sister, Marla, waving me over with a saccharine smile plastered across her perfectly made-up face. Even after a decade, the sight of her still stirred a whirlwind of emotions within me: anger, resentment, and a lingering sadness that our bond had shattered beyond repair. "Marla," I managed, forcing a tight-lipped smile, "fancy seeing you here." Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, zeroing in on the flyers in my hands. "Still running that quaint little bookstore of yours, I see." The condescending lilt in her voice was like nails on a chalkboard. "Yes, and it's doing quite well, thank you." Marla let out a derisive laugh, shaking her head. "You always were the hopeless romantic, clinging to those outdated dreams. When are you going to wake up and join the real world, Lila? A successful single woman like you shouldn't be wasting her time on such frivolous pursuits." My knuckles turned white as I gripped the flyers, fighting the urge to hurl them at her smug face. "At least I'm living an authentic life, Marla, instead of the facade you've so carefully constructed." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," I shot back, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You've always been jealous of me, ever since we were kids. That's why you did what you did. Stole Evan right from under me, just like you stole everything else that meant something to me." Marla's perfectly sculpted mask slipped, revealing a flash of the ugly, seething envy that lurked beneath. "Don't flatter yourself, Lila. Evan was never yours to begin with. He just realized what a pathetic, delusional loser you are and came to his senses." Her words cut deep, ripping open old wounds that had never truly healed. But this time, something within me shifted. A burning determination ignited in my chest, fueled by a decade's worth of pent-up anger and resentment. "Keep telling yourself that, Marla," I said, my voice low and steady. "But we both know the truth, and one day everyone else will too." With that, I turned on my heel and strode away, leaving her sputtering behind me. The time for cowering in her shadow was over. This was the start of something new, a reckoning years in the making, where the scales of justice would finally tip in my favor. No more playing the victim. It was time for Marla to face the consequences of her actions. As I stormed away from my encounter with Marla, memories came flooding back like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me in their bitter currents. It started when we were kids, really. Marla was always the favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. While I was the shy, bookish one, content to lose myself in the pages of a novel, Marla craved the spotlight, demanding attention with her antics and tantrums. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Mom would chide, her brow furrowed in disappointment whenever I fell short of Marla's lofty standards. Things only escalated as we grew older. In high school, Marla ruled the social scene, her posse of sycophants trailing in her wake. She snatched up the captain's position on the cheerleading squad, as well as the lead role in every school play. "Who would want to watch a play with you as the star, Lila?" she sneered when I dared to audition. "You're about as interesting as a piece of wet cardboard." And then came Evan, the one bright spot in my life, the kindred spirit who saw something in me that no one else did. We met during our freshman year of college and instantly clicked, our shared love of literature, and quiet nights spent reading together forming an unbreakable bond. At least I thought it was unbreakable. "Evan and I are getting married," Marla announced over dinner one night, her perfectly manicured nails gleaming as she flashed her gaudy engagement ring. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as I stared at her, dumbfounded. Evan, my Evan, had proposed to Marla? The pieces started to fall into place, the hushed phone calls, the sudden cancellations of our dates, the distant look in his eyes. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice cracking with the weight of his betrayal. Marla simply shrugged, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. "He wanted a real woman, not some mousy little wallflower. Can you blame him?" Our parents remained eerily silent, their stunned expressions soon giving way to poorly concealed delight. Finally, their golden child was getting the happily ever after she deserved. That night, as I lay in bed listening to Marla's peals of laughter drifting down the hall, a hard knot of determination took root within me. She might have won this round, but I wouldn't go down without a fight. It was time to turn the tables on my so-called sister. The next morning I confronted Evan, demanding answers. But his words were little more than a slew of excuses and half-truths, each one more pathetic than the last. "I'm sorry, Lila, but your sister, she's just got this fire, this passion that I can't resist." His voice trailed off, his gaze averting from mine as if he couldn't bear to see the devastation etched across my face. In that moment, I knew there was no salvaging our relationship, no coming back from the depths of his deception. Marla had well and truly poisoned the well, her venomous influence seeping into every crevice of what we'd once shared. As I watched Evan slink away, shoulders hunched in defeat, a cold clarity washed over me. If Marla wanted to play dirty, then so be it. This was war, and I wouldn't rest until I emerged victorious, even if it meant razing her precious fairy tale to the ground. I slammed the door behind me, leaning back against the cool wood as I fought to catch my breath. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, the echoes of Evan's feeble excuses still ringing in my ears. A soft knock made me jump, and I whirled around to find Theo standing in the hallway, his brow furrowed in concern. "Lila? Are you all right?" I heard yelling. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat, a choked sob escaping instead. Tears I'd been holding back for far too long spilled down my cheeks, and I found myself enveloped in Theo's comforting embrace. He was an unlikely friend, the shy, socially awkward tech genius who lived down the hall. We'd bonded over our shared love of books and penchant for staying in on Friday nights, content in each other's company. "It's Marla," I managed finally, pulling away to swipe at my damp cheeks. "She's done something unforgivable." Theo's expression hardened, and he guided me into my apartment, settling us on the worn sofa. "Tell me everything." And so I did, the whole sordid tale spilling from my lips in a torrent of heartbreak and fury. Theo listened without interruption, his jaw tightening as I recounted Marla's latest betrayal. "That manipulative, lying snake," he muttered when I'd finished. "She's gotten away with this for far too long, Lila. It's time we put a stop to her games once and for all." I blinked, taken aback by the steely determination in his voice. Theo was always the voice of reason, the level-headed counterbalance to my occasional bouts of recklessness. "What do you mean?" I asked warily. He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a newfound intensity. "We're going to expose her for the fraud she really is. Strip away that perfect facade she's so carefully constructed and show everyone the truth that she's nothing but a selfish, conniving witch who'll stop at nothing to get what she wants." A slow smile spread across my face as the weight of his words sank in. Revenge, sweet, delicious revenge, was finally within my grasp. "How?" I breathed, my pulse quickening at the thought. Theo's smile turned feral, sending a shiver down my spine. "Leave that to me. I might not be much of a fighter, but I know my way around a computer system better than anyone. If there's dirt to be found on your sister, I'll find it." Over the next few weeks, Theo became my co-conspirator, my trusted ally in the battle against Marla's tyranny. He hacked into her emails, her bank records, her social media accounts, unearthing a trail of lies and deceptions that would make even the most hardened cynic blush. Financial misdeeds, extramarital affairs, backstabbing her so-called friends. No stone was left unturned as we meticulously compiled our arsenal of evidence. With each new revelation, the flames of my determination burned brighter, fueled by the knowledge that soon, very soon, Marla's reign of terror would come crashing down around her. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Theo asked one night as we pored over the mountain of incriminating files. "There's no going back once we pull the trigger." I met his gaze, unwavering. "She brought this on herself. It's long past time Marla faced the consequences of her actions." A slow smile spread across his lips and he gave a solemn nod. "Then let's burn that bitch's world to the ground." The evidence was damning. A meticulously curated trail of infidelities, financial indiscretions, and outright lies that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. As Theo and I pored over the files, I could feel the righteousness of our cause burning within me, stoking the flames of a long-simmering fury. Your sister really is a piece of work, isn't she? Theo muttered, shaking his head in disbelief as he scrolled through yet another lurid email exchange between Marla and her latest boy toy. I shot him a withering glance. You're telling me I've been dealing with her lies and manipulations my entire life. He let out a low whistle. Well, she certainly made a mess of things this time. The question is, what are we going to do about it? A slow, feral grin spread across my face as the pieces finally clicked into place. We're going to give her exactly what she deserves, a taste of her own medicine. Theo arched an eyebrow, intrigued. Do tell. Over the next few hours, we hashed out the details of our plan. A meticulously orchestrated takedown that would strip Marla of every last shred of her carefully cultivated dignity. No more hiding behind her pristine veneer, no more playing the doting wife and beloved daughter. It was time for the world to see her for the duplicitous snake she truly was. We'll start by planting seeds of doubt, I explained, tapping my finger against the stack of incriminating documents. Leak a few choice tidbits to the right people, let the whispers and sideways glances begin to chip away at her perfect image. Theo nodded, his expression grim. And then we go for the jugular. Release everything we've got in one fell swoop. Let the truth detonate like a nuclear bomb right in the middle of her precious little fairy tale. Exactly. My gaze hardened, steely with resolve. I want her to lose everything. Her sham of a marriage, her status, her reputation. I want her to feel the same burning humiliation she inflicted on me all those years ago. For a moment, Theo's eyes softened, and he reached across the table to take my hand in his calloused grip. Are you sure about this, Lila? This is a point of no return. Once we set this plan in motion, there's no going back. I met his gaze, unflinching. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Marla has lied and cheated and stolen her way through life for far too long. It's time she learned that actions have consequences. His lips curved into a grim smile, and he gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. Then let's make that bitch pay. Over the next few weeks, we put our plan into motion, gradually leaking choice morsels from our trove of evidence to select members of our social circle. At first, the reveals were subtle, a whispered rumor here, a meaningful glance there, but soon, the doubts began to take root. I could see it in the way Marla's closest friends started to regard her with narrowed eyes, in the stony silences that greeted her at book club meetings and Sunday brunches. Little by little, the cracks in her meticulously constructed facade began to show, spiderwebbing outward until the whole sham threatened to crumble beneath the weight of its own deceit. And still, we kept the pressure on, releasing more damning evidence with every passing week. Sordid photos, incriminating audio recordings, bank statements detailing her financial treachery, nothing was off limits in our quest to decimate her credibility. Throughout it all, Marla remained blissfully oblivious, her perfectly coiffed head held high as she swanned through town, utterly convinced of her own untouchability. Her arrogance only fueled my determination, stoking the flames of a long-simmering fury that would soon erupt into an inferno of retribution. Because the best was yet to come, the grand finale that would reduce her entire world to ashes. I could hardly wait. The whispers had begun, a steady undercurrent of doubt and suspicion that rippled through our once idyllic town, eroding the foundations of Marla's carefully constructed fairy tale. I could see it in the sidelong glances and thinly veiled sneers that followed her wherever she went, the once adoring masses now regarding her with a newfound wariness. It was working, I realized with a quiet thrill of satisfaction. Our drip feed of damning evidence was having the desired effect, ripping away the layers of artifice and exposing the rot that lay festering beneath Marla's immaculate veneer. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. We needed to go bigger, to plant the seeds of discord deeper, if we were to ensure the total annihilation of her pristine reputation. Time for phase 2, Theo murmured, his expression grim as he handed me a thick manila envelope. I raised an eyebrow, thumbing through the contents, a dossier packed with incriminating photos, financial statements, and transcripts of Marla's most salacious indiscretions. Are you sure about this? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Once we put this out there, there's no taking it back. Theo's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening with resolve. She made her bed, Lila. Now she has to lie in it. With a steadying breath, I nodded. It was now or never. Over the next few weeks, I embarked on a whirlwind tour of reconnection, reaching out to our once tight circle of family and friends with the guise of reconciliation. Coffees and long lunches were had, old bonds rekindled under the pretense of burying the hatchet and moving forward. All the while, I subtly steered the conversations toward Marla, sharing carefully curated snippets from the dossier that painted a vivid picture of her betrayals and moral failings. "I can't believe she did that to you," Mom gasped, her eyes wide with horror as she pored over the damning evidence. "Oh, Lila, I'm so sorry. We never should have taken her side." Dad merely shook his head in stunned silence, his expression stricken as the full weight of Marla's deceptions finally sank in. One by one, the dominoes began to fall, each revelation stripping away another layer of blind loyalty, until the full, ugly truth was laid bare. By the time I was done, our once impenetrable inner circle had been thoroughly turned, their allegiances shifting in the wake of Marla's undeniable transgressions. Even Evan, her hapless husband, found himself wavering as the sordid details of her infidelities and financial treachery came to light. "I can't believe she'd do this to me," he muttered, running a hand through his hair as he stared at the incriminating photos. "After everything." His voice trailed off, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of sympathy for the man who had once been my world. But the feeling was quickly quashed, smothered beneath the weight of his own betrayal all those years ago. He'd made his bed, too. Now he could damn well lie in it. With each encounter, each deftly planted revelation, I could feel the tides beginning to turn in my favor, the ground slowly but surely shifting beneath Marla's feet. Her downfall was imminent, and I savored the anticipation like a fine vintage wine, letting it linger on my tongue as I bided my time. Because soon, very soon, I would have my reckoning, and Marla would finally answer for the lifetime of hurt and humiliation she'd inflicted upon me. This time, there would be no manipulations or lies to sway the judgment, only the cold, hard truth laid bare for all to see. I could hardly wait. The air was thick with anticipation as our family and friends gathered at Mom and Dad's house for what I had billed as a long-overdue reunion. Marla, of course, was fashionably late, a perfectly calculated move to ensure all eyes were on her as she swept into the living room, her every step oozing false graciousness. "So wonderful to have everyone together again," she simpered, air-kissing her way around the room as if she were royalty bestowing favor upon her subjects. I watched in stony silence, feeling the weight of the manila envelope burning a hole in my purse. Tonight was the night, the culmination of months of meticulous planning and strategizing. By the time the evening was through, Marla's reign of deceit would be nothing more than a smoldering ruin. "Let's get started, shall we?" I said, rising to my feet and gesturing for Marla to join me at the front of the room. "I think it's high time we cleared the air about a few things." Marla's perfectly arched brows knit together in a slight frown, but she acquiesced with a saccharine smile, ever the gracious hostess. Little did she know, her world was about to come crashing down around her. "For years, you've peddled this fiction, this carefully constructed fairy tale about who you are and what our relationship is," I began, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "You've lied and manipulated and backstabbed everyone around you, all in service of maintaining your precious image." Marla's smile faltered, the first cracks beginning to show in her impeccable mask. "Lila, what are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Marla. It's over." I pulled the envelope from my purse, letting its damning contents spill across the coffee table in a cascade of incriminating evidence. "The truth is finally out." A hushed gasp rippled through the room as our friends and family leaned in, their gazes riveted on the lurid photos and bank statements that laid bare the full extent of Marla's betrayals. Infidelities, financial crimes, blatant lies, it was all there, exposed for the world to see in glaring, undeniable detail. Marla's face, drained of color, her perfectly painted lips parting in a silent scream of outrage as the reality of her situation began to sink in. You did this. How could you?" A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I regarded her with cold disdain. "How could I? That's rich, coming from you. You've spent our entire lives undermining me, stealing everything that should have been mine. Well, no more. This is your reckoning, Marla, the consequences you've been dodging for far too long." "That's a lie." she snarled, rounding on our shell-shocked parents with pleading eyes. "You can't possibly believe this nonsense. It's all a bunch of doctored photos and falsified documents. I swear!" But the certainty had already seeped from her voice, cracking beneath the weight of the incriminating evidence that surrounded her. One by one, Mom and Dad, our friends, even Evan himself began to nod in grim acceptance, their eyes reflecting a newfound hardness as the scales finally fell from their eyes. "I think we've seen more than enough, Marla," Dad said quietly, his voice heavy with a weariness that spoke of decades of being manipulated and misled. "It's over." A strangled sound escaped Marla's throat, a guttural cry of anguished disbelief as the full weight of her deceptions came crashing down upon her. In that moment she was utterly alone, cast adrift in a sea of contempt and censure, with no allies, no lifelines to cling to. As I watched her crumple to the floor in a heap of designer clothes and smeared makeup, a profound sense of vindication washed over me. At long last justice had been served, and I had been the one to deliver it. The sweet taste of victory had never been so intoxicating. The aftermath of my grand revelation was swift and brutal, a reckoning that left Marla's once charmed life in smoldering ruins. As the shock wore off and the true depths of her deceptions came to light, a palpable shift took place, the tide of public opinion turning decisively against her. Suddenly, the same people who had once fawned over her every move couldn't be bothered to make eye contact, their faces a study in thinly veiled disdain and revulsion. Marla's supposedly dear friends dropped her like a bad habit, their long-standing allegiances crumbling beneath the weight of her exposed betrayals. Even our own family wasn't spared the fallout. Mom and Dad, so long blinded by Marla's manipulations, now regarded her with a potent mix of disappointment and simmering anger. "How could you do this to us?" Mom demanded during one particularly heated exchange, her eyes rimmed with unshed tears. "After everything we've done for you, all the chances we gave you." Marla, for once, was uncharacteristically subdued, her usual bravado nowhere to be found. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, her gaze downcast and lifeless. "I never meant to hurt anyone." The words rang hollow, a feeble attempt at contrition that did little to salve the wounds her deceit had inflicted. Dad merely shook his head, his expression hardening. "Save it, Marla. You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it." And what a bed it was, a tangled web of lies and indiscretions that quickly began to unravel with every passing day. Photos of her numerous affairs surfaced online, igniting a firestorm of scandal that left her reputation in tatters. Financial discrepancies were unearthed, hinting at potential legal troubles on the horizon. Even Evan, her hapless husband, couldn't turn a blind eye any longer, filing for divorce amidst a torrent of sordid revelations about her infidelity. Through it all, I watched with a strange sense of detachment, as if observing the implosion of someone else's life from a great distance. Gone was the seething rage that had once consumed me, replaced by a profound sense of catharsis, a weight lifted from my shoulders after years of carrying the burden of Marla's betrayals. She had brought this upon herself, I reminded myself whenever a flicker of residual guilt threatened to take hold. This was justice, pure and simple. The scales finally balanced after a lifetime of being tipped in her favor. Still, a part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity as I watched Marla's world crumble around her. She had become a pariah, shunned and reviled by the very people who had once hung on her every word. Her once vibrant spirit was utterly extinguished, replaced by a hollow shell of a woman who seemed to drift through life in a perpetual haze of shame and regret. It was during one such encounter, as I passed her on the street and caught a glimpse of her haunted expression, that a sudden clarity washed over me. This broken, pathetic creature was the true Marla, stripped bare of all her pretenses and deceptions, and in that moment I realized that I had already won. There was no need for further retribution or grandstanding. Her downfall was complete, her infamous reign of terror reduced to ashes and ruin. All that remained was for me to turn my back on the smoldering wreckage and begin charting a new course, one free from the shackles of her influence and the bitter chains of the past. As I walked away, head held high and shoulders squared, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of lightness, as if a great weight had finally been lifted from my soul. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years it belonged solely to me. Marla's fall from grace was absolute, and I, the forgotten sister she had wronged so deeply, had not only survived it, I had emerged victorious. In the weeks and months that followed Marla's spectacular downfall, an odd sort of calm settled over my life. The all-consuming fury that had once burned like a raging inferno within me had finally been extinguished, leaving in its wake a profound sense of peace and acceptance. Oh, there were still moments when the old resentments threatened to resurface. A passing glimpse of Marla's haunted, hollow-eyed stare, or an errant comment from a well-meaning friend that dredged up the lingering pain of her betrayals. But those moments were fleeting, mere hiccups in my newfound state of tranquility. Because at long last I was free from the shackles of Marla's manipulations and the bitter chains of the past that had bound me for far too long. With her reign of deceit laid bare and her carefully cultivated image reduced to ash, the power she'd held over me had simply evaporated like a puff of acrid smoke dispersed by the winds of change. It was an odd sort of victory, I mused as I wandered the sun-dappled aisles of my bookstore one crisp autumn morning. Not the blaze of glory I might have once envisioned, with Marla beaten and humbled at my feet. No, this was something quieter, more profound. A reclamation of self, a shedding of old skins, and the rebirth of my own sense of worth and identity. "Hey, you!" The soft tenor of Theo's voice drew me from my reverie, and I turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, a hesitant smile playing at the corners of his mouth. My heart gave a treacherous little flutter at the sight of him. My co-conspirator, my partner in vengeance, and perhaps something more? "Hey, yourself," I replied, arching an eyebrow in silent query. "Everything okay?" He drew in a steadying breath, seeming to steel himself for whatever words were about to come tumbling out. I wanted to check in, see how you're doing with, well, everything." My lips curved in a rueful smile. "You mean with taking down the Wicked Witch of the Midwest?" Theo's grin widened, the familiar teasing glint returning to his eyes. "Something like that, yeah." I shrugged, aiming for nonchalance, even as my pulse quickened beneath the weight of his steady gaze. "I'm good, Theo. Better than good, actually. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel free." His expression softened, those warm eyes of his drinking me in with an intensity that sent a shiver racing down my spine. "I'm glad to hear that, Lila. Really glad." We lapsed into silence then, the words hanging heavy and electric between us. In that moment, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something deeper in Theo's gaze. A promise, a beckoning toward new horizons and uncharted territory. But before I could gather the courage to give voice to the questions burning on the tip of my tongue, the spell was broken by the cheerful tinkling of the bell above the door, heralding the arrival of a customer. Theo blinked, his cheeks flushing slightly as he stepped back and cleared his throat. "Well, I should let you get back to it. Just, you know where to find me if you need anything, right?" I nodded, my own face growing warm as I scrambled to regain my composure. "Of course, always." With one last lingering look, he turned and slipped out into the bustling street, leaving me to ponder the myriad of possibilities that seemed to stretch out before me. New vistas waiting to be explored, unfettered by the baggage of the past. As I watched Theo's retreating form disappear into the crowd, I couldn't help but feel a spark of hope flicker to life deep within my chest. A new chapter was unfolding, one penned by my own hand and ruled not by the whims of others, but by the simple truths that had guided me through my darkest hours: resilience, determination, justice. Marla's reign was over. It was my turn to take the stage, and this time I had every intention of basking in the spotlight.